Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Jordan, and welcome to MenoPositive.
I got a good feeling.
Where we take a refreshingly positive approach to navigating menopause. If you're looking for practical tips, expert advice, and honest conversations, think of this as your personal pick and mix for how to optimize your body. Although we can't prevent menopause, we can redefine it. And that journey starts now. The other day, I was beating myself up over a list of things I need to do for myself. And I was wondering, why the hell haven't I gotten this stuff done? Why was I procrastinating? Most of us tend to be masters at juggling multiple responsibilities, big careers, aging parents, busy kids. But what about booking our doctor appointment, our Pilates class? What about updating our CV or applying for that new job? Well, friends, gather around and let's discuss the subtle art of female procrastination. We have become experts at prioritizing everyone else's needs over our own well being. It only makes sense that over time we've adapted to this manic lifestyle, which has left us blaming our anxiety or migraines on back to back Zoom calls, our insomnia on that small email from our boss, and forgetfulness on the sheer volume of stuff that we have to do. My point is, these symptoms could also be the subtle blinking neon signs of perimenopause. Here's what I want you to know. Prioritizing yourself isn't selfish. It's smart. As my friend Tracy Woodward says, self-care is healthcare. So today, let's stop procrastinating on self-care. We're going to get the 101 on perimenopause from the Perimenopause Doctor herself, Dr. Shahzadi Harper. Dr. Harper has dedicated her career to empowering women from all backgrounds to embrace perimenopause and menopause with confidence. As the founder of the Harper Clinic in London, she positions this hormone shift as not simply a phase to manage, but an opportunity to redefine and embrace your strongest, most confident self. With 30 years of medical expertise and a passion for helping women, she is more than a doctor. Let me tell you, she is a force. Dr. Harper is an entrepreneur and a public speaker. She's been in Vogue, Grazia, Cosmopolitan. She's collaborated with brands like Vichy and Wild Nutrition. And she joins us today to educate and inspire us. Shahzadi, welcome to MenoPositive.
Thank you. And thank you for such a wonderful introduction.
It is so nice to have you here. When we first met, I think we connected on this idea that menopause is not the end. It's a powerful new beginning. Give us your position on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I often say to women, midlife is not end of life. It can be totally a new sort of beginning, a reincarnation, or just a being. I think it's about taking ownership as a woman, because as you said at the beginning, we're such experts in looking after other people, but not prioritizing ourselves. And I think this is now the time to invest in ourselves.
I've had so many people write in and tell me that they are just starting this journey or that they want to get ahead of this journey. So can we go back to basics? Give us the 101 on perimenopause. Let's start with the physiological shifts that are happening in our body, because people think there's a clear marker for perimenopause, but there isn't.
No, and I think this is a good starting point, because I suppose 5 years ago, many people may not have even heard the term perimenopause. Menopause, yes, but menopause is often used as that umbrella term. So let's just start at the beginning in a way. Most sort of women with their wombs have periods, once they hit puberty. And what happens at puberty is our female sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, kick in. We get this cycle. And every month, if you don't get pregnant, you have a period. So, we're born with about 2 to 3 million eggs in our ovaries. Okay, we're born with it. But by the time we get to puberty, we've got about 2 to 300,000. Okay, so there's a natural sort of, it's called apoptosis, natural sort of killing off process. And then by the time we get to perimenopause, which is the stage before menopause. It's when our hormones start to fluctuate and decline. So those female sex hormones start to fluctuate and decline. It doesn't do it in a lovely linear fashion. It does it in this fluctuating manner. There's no sort of official beginning. It's not quite like your puberty, which we sort of know happens between sort of 10 and 14 for most women. It can start 10 years before your periods end. So menopause is when your periods officially end of your reproductive life cycle. And it's defined by 12 months of not having a period. So that time before that is perimenopause, and it's when our hormones start to fluctuate, they decline, our periods can become irregular, variable in length, and that's because our ovaries are no longer producing the hormones in the same way as they used to, in that nice cyclical manner. Now, not everybody has a period, so you might be saying to me, well, look, how am I supposed to know if I don't have periods? Or they may be on a form of contraception that doesn't give them a period. There are many more symptoms and signs, and I think that we didn't really talk about them before. Everybody talked about hot flushes or hot flashes and mood swings, but actually they can be a little bit more subtle in the beginning. It can be that insomnia, as you mentioned. It can feel that overwhelm, maybe not juggling things in the same way as you used to be able to do. Brain fog or brain haze, maybe not connecting the dots in the same kind of way, or feeling a bit indecisive, forgetting what you were about to say mid-sentence. So many women end up sort of leaving the workplace potentially because they feel that loss of confidence in themselves in their workspace.
And I like what you say that I think it's really important that people understand that this is not a straight line during perimenopause.
Yes.
This is why 1 week you can have a hot flash and then not have one again for 2 weeks, or all of a sudden, you could fly into a rage and then you're fine again for a few weeks. I think also the mental symptoms
Yes.
are worse than the physical. To me, it's like a million little paper cuts.
Yeah, so if you almost like split perimenopause into early and late, okay, in that early stage, it may well be more the psychological and mental anxiety, sort of overwhelm, maybe not feeling that you can drive on the motorway. That flatness of mood, loss of joy is what I hear a lot. A lot of women talk about, I just don't feel like myself. I don't know who I am. And it's that flatness. And as you said, because our hormones aren't declining in a linear fashion, one day you might be okay. And you think, oh, I'm okay. Another day you may feel sort of down in the dumps or in the doldrums. It's that fluctuant sort of roller coaster sort of, ride that we're on with our hormones.
And I find, for everybody listening, I think this is really important. It's quite common that when, as women, we're feeling off, that we put it off to quote unquote life stressors.
Well, we do. And I think in some ways it's difficult because, if I'm saying to you that menopause, sort of the average age is around 50. Perimenopause can start 10 years beforehand, for some women. So it could be your late 30s, early 40s. It may coincide with so many different things going on. Career. It may coincide with even having children, in your late 30s, early 40s, or your children leaving home to go to university, elderly parents. So there can be lots of stresses at this point. Relationship issues, lots of things happen in your 40s. And so I think it is very much that, as women, we will put it down to life stressors and going back to what you said, prioritizing everybody else, not really think it could be something to do with our hormones and health. And I think partly that's because society has sort of slightly played down our hormones and the power of these chemical messengers, because it's normal, isn't it, that we have a cycle, we have periods. I think it's almost been a bit of a joke. Oh, it's the time of the month, and now here we are, a stage in life. And so I think that it's time to change that narrative and really understand the power of these hormones.
What do you say to people who trivialize hormones? Because I had lunch with a friend the other day, and she was saying that she just knows something isn't right. She's a little bit irritable, a little bit forgetful. She even said the sound of somebody chewing could even drive her absolutely mental. I mean, we've all been there on that one. But she said, if I speak to my husband about it, he can be dismissive, walk it off. So what do you say to that?
Well, I think it's because of that negative narrative from before. And I think for those women who've experienced PMS or PMT, they understand how these hormones affect. And I've been one of those women. And so I think that this becomes almost like an extended PMS period. But, hormones don't just regulate our menstrual cycle. they affect our mood, our appetite, our energy levels. And I think it's because hormones are a normal part of us. Menopause is a normal stage of life that people just think that they don't do anything much, but they're so impactful and they impact so many different systems within our body. They are the Wi-Fi in our brain. They help with that connectivity. They help with, our mood, so many factors that I think, going back to men for a moment, I think it's almost like we need to sit them down and educate them. We need to educate, younger women. We need to educate, from children upwards, that hormones are these powerful chemical messengers that infiltrate and affect so many different systems within our body.
I was talking to my husband the other night and I said, it's really interesting when we are of childbearing years and we're about to have a baby, we have birthing plans. And I was like, I think we need menopause plans. Because how amazing would that be to sit down with your partner or your children and talk through it so that, like I can find myself bursting out at my daughter sometimes. And she's probably like, what the hell is going on with mommy today? But I thought that idea of kind of birthing plans and menopausal plans was interesting.
I think that's a great plan. I think it should almost be a perimenopause plan because I'd almost say that, of the different stages, perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause, I would say perimenopause is the hardest one to navigate. I think that everything becomes, sort of hypersensitive and, that we're also trying to sort of hold on a little bit to our youth, but there is this accelerated aging process. It's difficult to come to terms with what's going on with our skin, hair, our bodies. It affects the intimacy side of our relationship. And because men don't age in that same accelerated way as we do, we can be out of sync. And when there's a lack of intimacy, it can really impact a relationship. Men seem to want to have sex so much more than women do at this stage. And then, it can really affect how she feels about herself and her relationship and makes her feel more vulnerable. One way I described it is that, for women, walking along life's path, that path suddenly narrows in perimenopause. So there's less room for us to maneuver. So we're more sensitive to the changes that are going on and our adaptability isn't as sort of plastic as it might have been when we were younger.
And I think, this analogy of the narrowing road, sometimes you feel like you're going through it all by yourself because not everyone is talking about it as much. I mean, this is starting to change, but you do feel alone. It's funny you say that because my first few visits to see a doctor about perimenopause were initially driven by vanity. I was, I was 50 years old. I was starting to see changes in my skin. I was like, what is going on with my face? My skin was getting drier. I wanted to learn what I could be doing, like not to turn back the clock, but to age well.
Yeah, and I think many women are thinking like that. It's about sort of aging well, aging strong, aging healthy. One of the things I like to say is I want to die healthy, if that makes sense, because I don't want to be incapacitated. And I think often I see a number of women like yourself where the straw that broke the camel's back is, oh my goodness, I've woken up and my skin feels and my face is sagging or my hair has really thinned. Whereas they've been putting up with some of the other symptoms, which maybe they've not associated and just put it down to life stresses. But there's a huge vulnerability in perimenopause. And I think it is the hardest stage. And it's almost like I want to separate the different stages to help women to understand and also to give them that sort of compassion in each stage. And I think perimenopause can be a bit like walking on a tightrope and feeling that, one day you wake up, your hormones are okay, you can walk straight. Another day, you're sort of wobbling all over the place, you're tearful, your mood is everywhere and maybe you're just not feeling as sharp as you normally are. So I think even if it is because you think, oh my goodness, my face is sagging or I've lost collagen, which again, the hormone estrogen is responsible for that as well, maintaining that and also the plumpness of skin. So, when our estrogen levels drop, it does affect our skin. there's a much faster aging process. And when we lose estrogen, it causes inflammation in the body as well. So often we feel a bit puffy as well, and weight
Oh,
gain
is that
around the
what the
middle.
puffiness is from?
And the
Good.
weight
I'm going to
gain
blame
around the middle.
estrogen and not the donut I had.
Well, I think it's that domino effect on other hormones like insulin and cortisol. It's also a stressful time, so cortisol levels are raised. So again, there's so many different factors. And I think once we get into our 50s and into that menopause stage, it almost becomes a little bit of, fuck it, I'm there, I am who I am. You take a bit more sort of ownership in who you are, and you're not sort of trying to hold on to sort of the 30s in that same kind of way. And this new confidence develops.
Just when I didn't think I could love you more, you dropped an F-bomb. So thank you for that. You also, you've been very open. I think I read that when you started, when you were experiencing brain fog, you were initially driven by fear because you have a history of dementia in your family. Do you remember what that conversation was like when you went to the...
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I was in my early 40s, 43, 44, and I'd always prided myself that my memory was my superpower. I mean, and to the point that it used to freak people out, I'd remember things. But my mother does have dementia, and yes, she has lots of other sort of, sort of disease processes going on, but I definitely felt it accelerated around the menopause. And so when I started to become a bit forgetful, lose a few things, my purse, money, I wasn't
car
feeling
keys?
car
I always
keys,
lose
not
my car keys.
yeah, just not on the ball. I remember thinking, am I getting dementia? Is there something wrong with me? It felt a little bit too early, I thought, for thinking about perimenopause and menopause. And that's one of the things I think many women think, if you're 43, 44, perimenopause wouldn't jump to the forefront of your mind. And I thought, gosh, I think I need to get some blood tests done. Is it my iron levels? Is it my vitamin D? Should I be going to go and see a neurologist? And again, that's what happens to a lot of women in perimenopause. They get passed, from one consultant or speciality to another speciality because, if they've got palpitations, off they go to a cardiologist, the mood, psychiatrist. Here I am thinking, oh my goodness, do I need to see a neurologist because am I getting Alzheimer's or a psychiatrist? So I think it was really frightening for me to the point that I really thought, am I going to be able to carry on with my job? Am I going to be able to be a doctor moving forward? Am I going to have to give it up at this point in my life?
Isn't it funny, though, how we immediately jump to these extreme things like dementia versus, oh gosh, this might be perimenopause. But I think that's also a big part of the fact that this has not been talked about.
Yes.
And, here we are. There's so much little information out there, but we're gonna try to change that.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember also I was seeing a doctor and I said, okay, what are the signs of, what should I need to know about menopause? And he said that there were two indicators. One was the age that your mother went through menopause. And second, if you were a smoker. I mean, is that true or is that fake news?
Well, no, there are elements of truth there in the sense of if your mother went through an early menopause, and so I'm not going to say, a regular menopause, if she went through an early menopause, then there can be a hereditary and genetic component. Okay. Otherwise, I don't tend to say that your menopause is going to be like your mother's because I think we live quite different lives to our mothers. But if she went through an earlier one, then yes, there is some bearing there. But, there are other factors that can cause you to have a slightly earlier menopause. Smoking, like you said, a couple of years earlier, your ethnicity, somebody of my South Asian origin, average age of menopause is 46 and a half. Somebody of African Caribbean origin, Hispanic origin. It can be a couple of years earlier as well. Women who've not had children, a couple of years earlier too. Whilst there haven't been sort of formal studies, I've seen a number of patients who've had IVF cycles. So it's almost like burning up their hormones. So it happens a little bit sooner too. So there are factors that can do that, and mean that your age of menopause can vary, usually by 2-3 years. And also your ethnicity has a huge bearing as well.
The other thing, too, I had my daughter when I was 38. And I was with a friend the other day, and she had a baby in her early 40s. And she was saying to me that her cycle is starting to change. She was a 28-dayer, and now it's 25. So as women are starting to have, as women are having children later in life, is it possible to go straight from postnatal to perimenopause?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been somebody trying to have a baby, the last thing you want to hear is postnatal to peri. However, yes, And that's classic what your friend's saying, that her cycle is shortened, because that's usually one of the first signs of perimenopause, that your 28-day cycle then becomes maybe 25, 26 days. So you end up with maybe 2 cycles in a month. And yes, often you might put down the fatigue down to, being just having a baby, getting up in the night, but you may have iron deficiency anemia because of heavy bleeding. And fatigue is a really big symptom that often is so underplayed because women are putting it down to stresses in life. So I think that very much so, women can go postnatal to peri, and they need to be aware of it, especially when they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and not be scared of it, and not delay looking for support and help.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, awareness is the first step. And then then you can take control of your health
100%, yeah.
and you can take steps forward. You're talking about if you could break down the stages of perimenopause. So what would you break those stages into?
So I would break the stages down to sort of perimenopause. You have an early and you'll have a late stage. As the hormones start to sort of dwindle and sort of fluctuate downwards. Then I would say there's menopause and then there's postmenopause, because then there are other health implications. Sort of when your periods stop. Increased risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, dementia, general wellness, well-being, loss of muscle. So I think we need to be able to sort of separate it so we can target them a little bit more.
So we know what's going on in our body. You explain that very eloquently. And we also know there's a lot of things we can do to take control and reclaim our health. You have a book called The Perimenopause Solution.
Thank you.
All marked up here.
Okay.
That you co-authored with Emma Bardwell.
Yes.
And there is a lot of information in here. I mean, it's almost like a reference book.
It's a little handbook is what I would say. I know friends who are GPs who recommend it to their patients as a first stage. Again, it's about sort of knowledge is power.
And what I loved about it is that, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed, I think you suggest reading it with a highlighter pen. So if something jumps out at you and it seems practical and it seems right for you, then to highlight it, which I thought was a genius idea. But why was it important for you both to co-author the book?
It was really important because people talk about perimenopause and menopause. They talk about HRT, they talk about medication, but very much I have a more of a 360 approach. And so that's why I approached Emma and I said, she's a nutritionist. And I thought we wanted to really write this from the angle of sort of being a woman. Both of us were in that stage. And also look at nutrition, diet, lifestyle, and the things that women can help themselves with, but also to dispel the myths around, HRT, around testosterone, and also explain to women, like you said at the beginning, the power of hormones and what they do in our body and the impact they have, more than just hot flushes and mood swings. And I think we really wanted to change that sort of understanding for women. And it was also about control. So, being somebody who's always had PMS and felt out of control each month, to the point that, I would bump things or my car would get scratched and, all of those. I wanted women, even if you are having extreme symptoms, you can still have an element of control over it and know that it's going to pass or understand that this is what's going on. I think when it's that, I wanted to dispel that sort of fear of the unknown.
And I think you do it so beautifully because you break down, here's your symptom, here's a tip, here's a symptom, here's a tip. So, I marked, there's a chapter on pro-aging and, you explain, here's what's going on with your face, here's what's going on with your breasts, here's what's going on with your hands. And then, I have what you can do about it, which is what I love and what this show is all about. I feel everybody talking about menopause, the narrative has just been driven by here's all these awful things that are going to happen to you. And not enough people saying, and here's what you can do about it.
I'm very solution focused, and for me, I'm not somebody who's just whinging and sort of moaning and that kind of thing. I think you have to have a solution. I think I am sort of an eternal optimist. I like to look on the brighter side. And I think for me, it has to be solution focused. What's the point of just shouting about something if you can't do anything about it, or if you're not going to do anything about it?
And this is what I meant when I said you were a force.
Thank you.
I mean, but it's you do the same for sleep. You do the same even for things like thinning hair. Like you go down into the smallest things even.
Well, even sex and how to use your sex toy.
Yeah.
Which, was not the easiest of chapters for me to write, as my mother was sitting on the sofa at the other end while I'm sort of writing it down, what to do with your vibrator. But, it's important. It's important for women to, sort of reclaim their sort of sexuality and sensuality. And I think maybe when I was in my 20s and 30s, thinking about sex in your late 40s and 50s probably was not a thing. But then here you are, you get to that point in life and you think, actually, I've still got a lot of living to do, a lot of vibrancy. My life's not going to be shut down just because I've hit 50. And so I think that that's important to be open about and sort of say, look, it can feel a little bit like things aren't working like they should do or did do. Okay, but that doesn't mean to say you can't still have pleasure and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to get controversial. Let's talk Ozempic and GLP-1. Okay. Rife on the social circuits, Shahzadi. Everybody's whispering behind closed doors. Who's on it? Who's taking it? Why can't they just exercise and eat better? People talking about this. When I had this conversation with you, I remember you sitting across from me and saying, Lisa, people who talk like that have never been fat or have never struggled with obesity. You have professional experience and personal experience in this. So tell us why you're so passionate about this.
So I'm a huge advocate of GLP-1s. And, I think I've been much more vocal in 2025 about it on my socials as part of my perimenopause management plan because, weight and obesity is a multifactorial issue. It's not just about somebody's eaten too much and not exercised enough. And I think that those people who say that really don't understand the science behind, weight gain and also the psychology behind it. And for me, I think that understanding, in perimenopause, when your hormones start to change, the metabolic implications of that on other hormones like insulin and insulin resistance being one of the key things that tends to develop around this age. And I think that what the GLP-1s do is they address that, and also, I think for those women who have struggled with their weight when they were younger, it's that sort of constant food noise. And funnily enough, I was listening to Oprah when she was talking about her aha moment. And she said, I always thought it was about willpower. People stayed thin because of willpower. But she said, no, it's just that they don't think about it because, what the GLP-1s do is they improve satiety. So they mimic the hormone GLP-1 in our gut.
Okay, can I pause right there?
Yes.
Can you just explain what GLP-1 is?
Yes. So it's a glucagon-like peptide 1. Okay. So Ozempic contains this one gut hormone, GLP-1, and Mounjaro contains GLP-1 plus GIP. Okay, so 2 gut hormones. These are hormones which we normally have in our gut.
So they're natural in our bodies.
They're natural in our bodies,
anyway.
yeah. And, what tends to happen is because at this stage we get metabolic disturbance because hormones change, insulin isn't working like it does. So that's why we end up with this deposition of fat. And, maybe some of us aren't producing the same amount of hormones as other people. And so these injections, because they tend to be injections, although there is an oral version of semaglutide, which is the active ingredient in Ozempic. What they do is these injections, they release this hormone or mimic the hormone, which sends signals to your brain to tell you that you're full. So satiety. And they also work by sort of delaying that or slowing down gut transit. Okay, so it keeps you fuller for longer. I mean, yes, there are side effects, and we can go into them later if we wanted to. But the other way it does is it helps to improve that insulin sensitivity. So by working in these 3 ways, it sort of turns off that food noise. So it's almost like you forget about food, or you just think about it when you actually are hungry. You're not constantly thinking about it. It's a bit like somebody's described it a bit like people with ADHD have this constant noise in their brain. When they go onto ADHD medication, it all calms down. And it's the same here, and that food noise calms down. And, from a personal point of view, I was a fat teenager. I use food as a comfort. It was also joy. It was pleasure. There were lots of things around it. And I've come from a culture where food is love. So I think, understanding why somebody is overweight or why they've developed obesity, you have to understand that psychology behind it, also their family history. We know that, if you were born to an obese parent, you are more than likely more than 50% likely that you will develop it. And also look at other factors going on in life as well. And so I think you really have to address it from a multi-pronged approach. I don't think women are lazy. I don't think that they are just decided, hey, I'm going to sit here, watch Netflix and pig out and just get fat. I
We don't
think
have time.
you don't. But, in midlife, in perimenopause, I think you may well be tired, which then does increase your hunger hormones the following day and the cravings. You may also lean on food to give you energy because you are tired and you're feeling flat in mood. You may use it to give you a bit of dopamine. It works in the same reward pathway. So there are lots of factors why you might end up overeating or eating the wrong types of food because it's about just getting through the day, and getting through this stage. And so I very much believe that it can be part of the solution or part of the tools for managing perimenopause. I often call it the quadrangle of care. If we're thinking about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, I think GLP-1s, and we don't have to prescribe it in the same kind of doses that maybe for those people who want those significant, need significant weight loss, we can talk about sort of microdosing or tailoring it to each woman, and which is something that I do in my clinic.
That's really interesting. And I love the way you position it, though. It's just another tool in our toolbox. Yeah. And again, that's what we're trying to do here is open everybody's eyes up to here's a number of tools. This may work for you. This may not work for somebody else. And, you quoted Oprah. I'll quote Mel Robbins, who says, let them.
Yeah.
If there are other women or other people who want to do this and they feel it's right for them, just let them. If it makes them feel good about themselves, if it helps them get through the day, just let them.
I think the problem is when it comes to weight, people think that that person must be lazy. Or there is that sort of, behind the scenes, nobody's openly talking about it because of fear of being judged. I get messaged a lot by women on social media that say to me, I haven't told my husband. It's been life-changing for me. I'm scared to tell my friends because I'm for fear of judgment, but I've been struggling. And it doesn't just affect your physical health. It really helps to improve your mental health. And what I found is that what happens when somebody is on GLP-1, it makes them eat a bit more mindfully. They go and exercise a bit more. It's a bit like how when we first started out on the HRT pathway, HRT was a catalyst for change. GLPs can assist, but also be a mega catalyst for making those positive changes that somebody wants to do.
I love that. So if you're feeling better about yourself, then you probably will go out
Yeah.
for another walk, or you might show up at the gym with that membership that you've had for years. So it just gives you that extra energy to start making more positive changes in your life.
I think it has to be done alongside behavioral modification because many people have disordered eating. And especially, I think our generation of Gen X, when we were told 1,000 calories a day, but never told which 1,000 calories
Yes.
we needed to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And also understanding things like you must ensure you've got protein in your diet, maintaining muscle mass, hydration. So it's not just a simple here, have a quick shot and that's it. And I think that's maybe where the problem also lies, that there is that potential for abuse. And, especially if somebody has had eating issues in the past. But also, I think when people think it's a quick fix, it's not a quick fix. You have to kind of rewire your brain to think differently if you're going to keep that weight loss off.
If you decide to go on one of these, is it also something that needs to be monitored? Like, does somebody come in and see you every 3 months? And is there a dosage to it?
So when I prescribe, I will always make sure I do somebody's blood test beforehand, and I do a full assessment. And it's not just about your BMI, it's not just about body mass index. You have to also weigh up somebody's body composition. We know that women become more fatty at this age. So it's about fat and muscle. The waist measurement is also key, ethnicity as well, because, it's different BMIs for as in what's measured as overweight. Also, I look at things like your family history. Do you have a strong family history of cardiovascular disease, stroke, blood pressure, high lipids? Do you yourself have an obesity history or a weight history? Let's look at, were you fat as a teenager? Did you have a lot of weight after you had your baby and it was difficult for you to lose? So, there's more than just your BMI that you take into consideration. And then I do monitor on a monthly basis, at least for the first 2-3 months, so that somebody gets understands what they're doing. We can monitor side effects. And if you start low and go a bit slow, which is what I tend to do with perimenopause and menopause, rather than just jumping up the scale, you tend to find less side effects and you're monitoring. And there can be some serious side effects. We know that gallstones is one of them. Pancreatitis is one of them. But, joking aside, one of the things I would say with gallstones is, what we got taught at medical school, the high risk group for gallstones, it was called the 4 Fs: fat, female, in their 40s, and fertile. So hormonal. So I'm saying,
Okay, the four Fs.
a woman at this stage in life is probably slightly at a higher risk of gallstones anyway. So, one of my ladies the other day, I said, look, why don't we do a liver scan just so we know where we're starting from?
But I like where you're going with it, low and slow.
Yes.
Let's start there. But thank you for informing us more about this, because, even for me, I'm just seeing what seeing in the paper. I was at a wellness festival called Alma a few months ago, and they were talking about it, but saying that so far the science is good. So far, they're not seeing,
Well, they're even talking about low doses for things like osteoarthritis, reducing inflammation in the body, for, maybe a positive effect for reducing Alzheimer's as well. So there are lots of positives about it potentially. We're working through the science, but we also know what obesity does, the age-related diseases, chronic diseases, diabetes, what it does. So I think, again, it's about personalizing. It's about weighing up the risks versus benefits for each person. And then making that sort of informed choice.
let's go on to the next topic, less controversial. HRT, hormone replacement therapy. There are still so many mixed messages and misinformation out there. Can you help set the record straight? I've got some true or false questions.
Go for it.
Let's do some myth busting, shall we? Let's have some fun. All right. You should only take HRT once you've hit menopause and your period has stopped.
No. And I really want to say, no, you can start HRT when you still have periods, when you're still in your perimenopause, when you have symptoms. You do not have to wait for periods to stop.
True or false? HRT is only for severe menopause symptoms.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes some women think, oh my goodness, I have to wait until my symptoms are so severe before I can go on to it. No, if those symptoms are impacting you, your life, your family, your work, your health, then you can go on to it.
True or false? HRT causes breast cancer.
So the answer I would say is depending on which type you go on to. Okay, so if you go onto the body identical, we know that from studies that these are so far showing that they're more breast cancer neutral. But, I can't categorically say no, no, no. We know the longer that you take HRT, if you're on a synthetic version, then potentially it does slightly increase your risk. I think for most women, though, when they weigh up the risks versus benefits for themselves, then actually they can make that choice. And considering how debilitating some symptoms can be, HRT, if we're looking at the synthetics, if you are somebody who drinks 2 glasses of wine every night, that is a higher risk than somebody who is on HRT. Okay. If you are somebody obese, then that doubles your risk of breast cancer compared to your overall risk for breast cancer, and also is 6 times more than your risk if you're on HRT. So I think, if I say to you the average, so the risk for a woman at the age of 50 for developing breast cancer is 23 in 1,000 women will get breast cancer. If you are an obese woman, that risk becomes 23 plus 24. So an extra 24 cases. If you are somebody who drinks 2 glasses of wine every night, it's 23 plus 5. Okay. If you're somebody on HRT, and we're talking about sort of lumping all of the synthetics together, it's 23 plus 4. Okay. Wow. If you are somebody who exercises regularly, a normal body weight, then it's 23 minus 7. So when I have a conversation with women, we look at what I would say are the modifiable risk factors, the things that we can change. Let's do those. Genetics, we can't, and, HRT helps us to live a more healthier life. We know that HRT reduces risks of colon cancer, improves well-being, wellness, and also, helps with mental health.
And you mentioned bioavailable and synthetic. I think we can also monitor how we metabolize. It depends on how you metabolize the estrogen as well. And that's something to look out for as you age as well, if you're on.
And I'll just give you the example of me. So, you know, my gold standard for starting somebody on an HRT would be, the body identical estrogen, body identical progesterone, which is the natural progesterone that our body would naturally produce. Now, that doesn't suit me because, as I've said to you before, I've got a history of PMS, and premenstrually, our estrogen levels go down and progesterone becomes a bit more dominant. So I find when I take natural progesterone, I feel really moody, really down, makes me hungry as hell, and so I feel worse for it. So I choose to take a synthetic progestogen, knowing it slightly increases my risk of breast cancer, but knowing overall, I feel here I am sitting with you. By taking HRT, it's also reducing my risk of Alzheimer's. It's helping me to function well. So I've made that informed choice for me that, if I have to weigh up Alzheimer's versus breast cancer, I'd rather not have Alzheimer's and deal with the modifiable risk factors when it comes to breast cancer.
And then just really check your breasts.
Yeah.
Everybody check their boobs
Yeah.
regularly. I do really appreciate, though, you really bring in your personal experience into all of the conversations. Everything I've listened to you, and or even today, I really appreciate you saying, this is my experience with it, or I think that's really important, and it helps people connect with you, I think.
Well, yes, I am a doctor, but I'm a woman too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the important thing to take away. I have 5 younger sisters. I have a daughter. So for me, being female friendly and sort of just owning up to what I do, I think it helps other women. Like I said, for me, I'm weighing up the risks versus benefits for me. Everybody has to do that, and it's more about just knowing what the information is so you can make that choice.
And you do that with your patients as well.
Yeah.
They can have that. They need to weigh that and have that conversation
Yeah,
themselves.
it's not just about choice. I get sort of a little bit annoyed when people say it's about choice. It's about informed choice. If a woman doesn't understand, then what kind of choice can she make?
Absolutely. All right, back to true or false. You ready?
You ready?
Okay. HRT can be used as birth control.
No, definitely not. So if you are a perimenopausal woman, even if your periods have become irregular, if you don't want to get pregnant, we need to think about birth control.
Once you start HRT, you need to take it for the rest of your life.
You don't, you may want to, but you can choose to come off it. There are some women who feel that when they've gone through the worst of it, in their late 50s or something, they might think, well, I want to just revert back to what nature intended in a way. They feel more comfortable in their skin. The aging process doesn't scare them so much. They choose to do that, and so you can wean off. Personally, I wouldn't. I don't want to unless there's a medical reason for me to come off it. But and I would say the same to many women. I would say, look, it does help prevent your risk of fractures, osteoporosis. It can help with, sort of reducing inflammation in your body. It helps with reducing cardiovascular risk. It helps with your mind, your brain connectivity. So I think, I would question somebody, why do you want to come off it? What are the reasons? That doesn't mean to say they can't come off it.
Yeah, I think there are some people who don't want to be on medication
Yeah.
for the rest of their life. But I think it's really interesting because you look one way, and if your heart isn't working well, or I have a thyroid condition, so my thyroid doesn't work well, we have no problem going on medication for those things, which we likely have to be on for the rest of our life.
Yes, you would have to, yeah.
But if I look the other way, I have a medical condition where my ovaries have stopped working. And we know that we needed everything our ovaries was doing, producing hormones. We needed them, or we do need them to function at our best, but we're still putting it off to life stressors, or we're still really questioning taking medication for it or getting support for it. It's really interesting.
It's interesting because there you have your ovaries, there you have your thyroid, there you have a pancreas. So when your pancreas isn't working so well, you have diabetes. When your thyroid's not working well, you have underactive thyroid. When your ovary's not working well, you have perimenopause and menopause. You would definitely take medication if you're diabetic. Definitely if you have an underactive thyroid, you would never consider stopping that. And yet here we are thinking about sort of menopausal ovaries, like, not thinking about sort of supporting and supplementing them. I think that the thing is, because menopause is seen as that natural phase, but my issue with it is, 100 years ago, we would be dead, 5 years post menopause. But we're living about sort of 30-40% of our lives post menopause. So I think we need to change our mindset around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you explain what the difference is between I guess you call them synthetic hormones and bioidentical
Yeah,
hormones?
so bioidentical, or what I would say is regulated bioidenticals, often we call them body identicals. So these are hormones which are chemically identical to the natural hormones our body would produce. So 90% of the estrogen in our body is 17 beta estradiol, which is mostly what's in most of the HRT preparations. And then we have natural micronized progesterone, which is the same progesterone as we have in our body. That would be part of the normal menstrual cycle. Synthetic is a version of it which does similar things, but is not identical. Okay, so that usually tends to be more what we call them progestogens rather than progesterone. And so HRT can be a combination of estrogen. Most of them tend to have 17 beta estradiol in it. And it's usually that progestogen component, which is synthetic. And that's the bit that increases your risk of breast cancer slightly.
Okay, okay. Now, for women who are asymptomatic, would you still recommend HRT?
So I often say, are you really? First of all, are you really? Do you
Yeah.
have vaginal dryness?
Or shut up.
Like for example, I mean, the one bit of HRT we haven't sort of touched upon is local vaginal estrogen. But I think, do you have vaginal dryness? Are you tired? What's your mood like? I think often they may, well, look, about 20% of women do sort of sail through. Okay, that doesn't mean to say they don't have any symptoms. It may well be that that symptoms don't impact them in that kind of way. And I think that
Or they
it's,
don't disrupt their normal course of their
yeah,
life in the
yeah.
way it does for other women.
Yeah, but I think I gave you this example. If I was a billionaire on a super yacht, I had a chef making me my meals, throughout the day. I had, a yoga instructor. I could have my nap in the middle of the day. Maybe my symptoms wouldn't impact me in the same kind of way. And maybe I might think, well, do I really need HRT? But HRT is not just about the acute symptoms here and now. And yes, they help with the symptoms you're experiencing now. The hot flushes, night sweats, insomnia, but it also has a positive long-term effect. Now, currently, HRT is not licensed for what we call primary prevention. So we're not meant to just prescribe it for preventative health.
Yeah.
Okay. I think things might change, when we're talking about positive aging, longevity, optimizing health, and even if some of it is somebody's coming in and saying my hair and skin's changed, and it's affecting my mental health. So I think it's better to just sit down and have a conversation. There's so many symptoms, and I think in the perimenopause solution on page 283, there's a symptom questionnaire actually. And I think when you read the symptom questionnaire, you think, actually, I do have some of these symptoms. I do feel this way. And it's one of the things I find when I send it to patients when they come in. I always send them a questionnaire, and a lot of them come in and say, I hadn't really thought of that. I
Yeah.
hadn't really thought of that.
And again, my experience, sometimes you don't know until after. Like, so when I look back, like, and also now that I'm getting more informed, when I look back, I can go, oh yeah, maybe that forgetfulness or that irritability. Oh, yes. I love when you said that. Are you really?
Well, I had a lady last week, and the thing that prompted her was her skin and her aging. And then she said, I think I might have been experiencing symptoms for the last 2 years. And she was quite upset and thinking, had I come 2 years ago, would I not have aged as much? And I said, look, I can't really say. Let's not think about the past. Let's move forward. But I think many women do look back. As somebody today say, I think this must have started back in 2021, but here I am 4 years later.
I recognize that a little bit in myself for sure. Is it true that, is the medical community looking to change the name of hormone replacement therapy? To is it, what is it? Like hormone medical treatment?
MHT, medical hormone treatment.
Medical hormone
So I
treatment.
think I think around the world it is called MHT, like in America and places, and but here we're trying to sort of make that transition, but because HRT is so instilled in us here, I think it's going to be a bit difficult, or it's going to take time to do it. Yeah.
For those people who cannot take HRT or choose not to take HRT, what are some of the non-hormonal
Yeah, and I just want to
alternatives?
say one of the reasons why they want to change it from HRT to MHT is because HRT says hormone replacement therapy. So we're not really replacing identical to your 20s or anything. And that's why they want to call it medical hormone. That's why we want to call it. And I think it's a better way of doing it. And especially in perimenopause, when you still do have some of your own body's hormones. I often say what we're doing is topping it up rather than we're not replacing it. So yeah, there are lots of things that we can do for women who can't take hormones. There's a non-hormonal medication out there for hot flushes, night sweats, Vioza, or Fazolinetant. I think it was advertised in the midst of the Super Bowl last year and the year before for hot flashes. But I think it's very much about what your symptoms are. There's no there isn't anything as good as hormone replacement therapy for perimenopausal symptoms, or for the vast array. But for example, if your symptoms tend to be more mood, anxiety, sleep related, potentially adding in, I like to call it a serotonin booster, but the antidepressants is what, you may have heard the name that can be used, but there are other things like sort of gabapentin that can help with sleep, with anxiety, with mood, but also most women, even if they can't take general hormones, can take vaginal hormones to help with that vaginal health, with the pelvic floor, for vaginal dryness. So those can definitely be added in. And I think that also, it's key to also mention a few supplements that I think that can really help women: vitamin D, magnesium, omega-3 to help with reducing inflammation, probiotics. And I think it's about sort of tailoring the medication to each particular person and their, I suppose, significant symptoms.
I wanna go back for a second to your billionaire analogy because, I think it's interesting. You've talked about this as well. You go away on a retreat, like we all go away on some health retreat and we feel amazing. And we're like, how can we hold on to this feeling? I mean, I was at, like I said, at this wellness festival in the south of Spain. And I was like, I've got pictures on my phone of the water, and I'm like, oh, I could just go back to these photos every time I want to go back there. But then you come back to real life and obviously again, quote unquote life stressors. These changes happen. And I guess what you're saying as well is that the hormone replacement therapy can just help keep you on an even keel throughout, or
Stress is a big factor. And I think we have often not really thought about it as part of the impact it has on our hormones, our life, our inflammation, our weight, all of those factors. And I think that we are living in much more stressful times than we ever did. And that's why when you go on holiday or when you're away, sometimes you might not even need the same amount of dosage of HRT or, your treatment. And that's probably because you're not living in that fast pace. You're not working. You're not, rushing around to pick the children up. You're not rushing to do this. And so I think that you can't get away from those life stresses. That is life, and especially London life in a way, if you're living in a big city and something like that. So I think that it's difficult in modern day life and the expectations that are on women to continue working, to still look good and sexy and still look after all the juggle,
yeah.
I think it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, I think there's an epidemic of chronic stress
Yeah, yeah.
in this generation. Dr. Harper, how would people know when it's time to see somebody?
I usually say when you don't feel like yourself. Okay. And I think we all know how we feel. And I think, sometimes just take a moment, sort of pause, breathe, and just sort of reflect. Take a moment for yourself to think, how do I feel? And I think it is about that. If you don't feel like yourself, even if you're in your late 30s, your early 40s, your mid 40s, I think about it sooner rather than later. It's not just about managing your hot flushes or your insomnia. It's looking It's actually looking after your long-term health for the future. And even if it's not perimenopause, it's a great time for a medical check-in. Checking things like your thyroid, nutritional deficiencies, looking at, your future health and looking at your cholesterol, your lipids, your pre-diabetes screen. It's really sort of prepping for that next stage. And yes, it may well not be related to perimenopause because there's so many things that can mimic it, like an underactive thyroid, like iron deficiency, like vitamin D deficiency, like fibromyalgia. But it could well be. And even if it's not, it's time to sort of address the other factors.
Now, the final question that we ask all of our guests, knowing what we know now about perimenopause, what would you tell our 35-year-old listener?
Yeah. One, that it can come sooner than you think. So start thinking about it.
What would you tell our 45-year-old listener?
It's going to get better. I was going to say it's going to get better. And that adjustment that you're maybe struggling with coming to terms with, you definitely will come to terms with it. And, there's a positive future out there.
And what would you tell our 55-year-old listener?
I don't think I'd tell a 55-year-old anything because they probably got to the point that they're not going to listen to you anyway. They're just going to say, fuck it.
Another F-bomb from Dr. Harper. I think we're going to call it there. Dr. Shahzadi Harper, thank you so much for being part of our MenoPositive community and for giving us the 101 on perimenopause today. How can people listening get in touch with you?
So you can get in touch with me through my website, www.theharperclinic.com, and do follow me over on Instagram at Dr. Shahzadi Harper.
She does have some great advice on her Instagram as well. And Dr. Harper, I normally bake for all of our guests because this is like my virtual kitchen table.
Okay.
I know you love a healthy breakfast.
I do.
So today I made you my healthy granola.
I love that.
Gluten-free granola with coconut flakes and pumpkin seeds and hemp hearts and made with maple syrup and lots of goodness. So I hope maybe you'll try it out on some Greek yogurt or something.
I definitely will. I love that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. We are the first generation of women who will be postmenopausal for half of our life. If you're listening, I know you want to live the second half of your life as well as the first half. So listen to your body, prepare your body. And to steal a line from Dr. Harper's book, The Perimenopause Solution, take control of your hormones before they take control of you. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You make it so much fun, actually, and so natural.
Oh, that's
which
lovely.
is really
It was
nice.
a great conversation.
No, it's good. It's lovely.
I'm glad you had a good time. That's the important. It's supposed to be like girlfriend conversations.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to the granola.
Are you still going?
It's still going.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I knew you were menopositive when you downloaded this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love bringing this information to you, and I love that you're taking control of your health. You can follow MenoPositive on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. Join me next week as we discover more ways to optimize our bodies. Because together, we're going to redefine menopause.
I got a good feeling.